Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Lamar, it's late. You're in Spain. So anyway, I want to thank everyone. My name is Kate Hoving. I work at the Reves Center for International Studies. And I'm looking forward to, I think, a really fun and interesting session today. We've got four experts really in study abroad. And we're going to share just some thoughts and ideas for those of you who are students and attending. Please feel free to ask questions either in the chat or we've got a small group. So I'm sure the panel will be happy to talk a little bit informally. And we are recording, so hopefully that's okay. And so I'm going to just start with some basic questions and then we'll just kick it off. Oh, Sylvia, we are now being joined, I'm going to embarrass her, by the Director of Global Education Office. So Sylvia Mittendorfer is now with us. All right, so let's start. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, tell us what you're doing professionally now, where you studied abroad, and then if the program, what kind of was it, summer exchange, something like that. And I think I'm going to start with Lamar Chambly. If you could tell us, introduce yourself, and then answer these similar questions.
Yeah, definitely. And first off, thank you so much for inviting me to this. I am currently in the DM section messaging Professor Longo. It's been over 10 years since I graduated from William & Mary, so seeing her again and seeing you all is really incredible. My name is Lamar Chambly. I use he, him pronouns. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I'm currently in Toledo, Spain, which is incredible that I was invited for this panel during this day because I think I'm here as a direct, after my study abroad experience. I am now full-time a high school Spanish teacher, which is incredible after studying Spanish at William & Mary. Now, every day, I have the incredible opportunity to stand in front of kids that look like me and come from my same background, and to get them really excited about learning languages and traveling the world. And so I'm a high school Spanish teacher full-time. I also started a nonprofit called Teens of Color Abroad. We provide high school students of color with global language learning opportunities. This was also a direct result of my study abroad experience. I didn't see many students that look like me in that program. And so I decided to do something about it. And I created a program for high school students to study languages online, but then also to study abroad. And so that's a little bit about me.
That's great. Thank you. And now, Maya, would you like to tell us, and I love your cat, you can introduce your cat if you'd like.
Yes. Well, this is one of the cats. This one is Kitty Pride, the black one that'll probably show up at some other point. That's Kurt Wagner. They love to make cameos anytime that I am on Zoom. So my name is Maya Sapiurka. I'm class of 2010. I'm currently the Associate Director of Administration for Georgetown University's Interdisciplinary Program in Neuroscience. What that means is I run the day-to-day functioning and also, contribute to the development of a Ph.D. neuroscience program at Georgetown University. When I was at William & Mary, I had the chance to study abroad twice. In the summer after my freshman year, I did the Summer in Cadiz program, which was absolutely incredible. And then the summer after my junior year, I used my Monroe Scholar money to do a small research project in Lima, Peru. I was a Hispanic Studies minor. And it was really some of my that, and then my neuroscience research at the college was my first, yes, the William & Mary sweatshirt. It was my first experience of doing independent research and coming up with my own topic. So I am thrilled to be here to talk about it today as a STEM major.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And I just want to know, we've just figured out that the Cadiz program is in its 20th year, basically. So very exciting. It's coming up. So now I'm going to ask to hear from Nasha Lewis. Nasha, can you tell us about yourself?
Hello, everyone. I am the Associate Director of Global Education and Inbound Programs at the Reves Center. So I get the opportunity to work with both Teresa and Sylvia and also primarily work with students who want to study abroad. I also get an opportunity to work with students from our partner institutions that want to study abroad, but here on campus at William and Mary. So that's great. I participated many years ago in Peace Corps, and I served in Mali, West Africa, for a little over 2 years, about 2.5 years. So that was the inspiration for me to really get into this work and provide other opportunities for students and others to experience an international education or have an international experience abroad. So I'm excited to be here.
That's really cool. Okay, and then Teresa Longo, if you could tell us about yourself.
Sure. So your question is about what's our professional life now and what was our first study abroad, I think. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, what you're doing
Okay.
now. What was your study
So
abroad?
right now I am the Associate Provost for International Affairs at William and Mary. I'm the Executive Director of the Reves Center. I am a faculty member, and I'm getting ready to take students abroad to Argentina for winter term, where we're going to study human rights together.
Great. And did you tell me your first study abroad
Oh,
was
right.
Mexico,
Sorry.
right?
Yeah, that's the important part, actually. I love hearing about everyone's first experiences because they're so foundational, which is true for me too. My first time abroad was to Morelia, Mexico, when I was an undergraduate student. And of all the things I remember from being an undergraduate student, I remember that the most.
And now I'm going to open this up to see if anybody wants to talk about it rather than going around.
Okay.
So, and this is partly because I know as when I was an undergraduate, I was discouraged from studying abroad. So I got a lot of that messaging. So what I want to ask you is, how did you choose to study abroad? What was it something you knew you wanted? Was it something that maybe a family member or a peer suggested, or an advisor, something you read about? I'm just trying to figure out what was the impetus for you to study abroad, and anyone can take this, okay?
Yeah, I'll jump right in. I had fallen in love with Spanish since I was a kid. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York before we moved down to Virginia. And so ever since I was young, I learned colors and farm animals, etc. And I eventually went to a school where they had a study abroad program, but I couldn't afford it. And I often joke and say that that was my villain origin story, because I went to William and Mary with the mission to study abroad. And then my sophomore year, I was accepted for a medical mission trip to the Dominican Republic with Dr. Ade, with a program called Somos. And I didn't have my passport. No one in my family had ever traveled out of the country. And so I had a really vulnerable moment with him where I admitted I don't have a passport. No one in my family ever traveled. And he said, well, why didn't you say anything to me? And slid his credit card to me across the table and said, we are going to make sure that we get you a passport. We are going to make sure that we get you this trip to the Dominican Republic. And so it took one educator in my corner to see my passion and to see my excitement. And so he completely broke down the barriers that had stopped me from studying abroad. And so I went to William and Mary knowing that I wanted to do that. And then once you get to William and Mary, just my professors and the classes and the opportunities that was there, I feel like there were so many opportunities for me to continue traveling, but it was my experience at William and Mary that really opened the world for me.
That's great to hear. Anybody else have something similar or something you want to share?
Yeah, I was lucky that, well, my father was born and raised in South America, in Uruguay. And my whole family is from there. So I grew up traveling internationally, mostly to see my family there. But I learned my Spanish in the classroom more than from my dad. And so I knew I wanted to study abroad in some way, shape, or form, but I also knew that it would be hard to fit in because I went into William and Mary planning to major in neuroscience, but also planning to take Spanish classes to keep up the language. And I knew it'd be difficult to fit in the study abroad around all of the classes and the labs and the research I knew I would need if I wanted to go to graduate school. And so the great thing about the Cadiz program is it happens over the summer. That summer after my freshman year, I hadn't quite I'd just begun in a research lab, but I wasn't at the place where I would want to stay over the summer and do research quite yet. So, and the CADIS program comes along with a research project that you have to do. You have to develop your own research project and complete it there. So that was really the big draw for me, was to be able to travel abroad really for the first time without my family. It was just going to be me, you know, sort of getting to experience travel without my parents along with me as a guide, but also to, you know, sort of do my own independent in-person research for the first time. And then when I had that chance again with my Monroe Scholar money, I really jumped at it because I had such an amazing experience the first time when I was in Spain.
That's great. Well, and I'm wondering, Nasha, you were in the Peace Corps. Was that your first experience going abroad, or had you done a study abroad before that?
No, I did not do a study abroad before Peace Corps. It was also not my first time going abroad because my parents, you know, had taken my siblings and I to the Caribbean and some other locations, but that was the longest time and the first time I had gone alone. So I will say that.
Well, I know Teresa, I think you told me that was that your first time when you went to Mexico? What stimulated your interest to go overseas?
For sure.
Told you, or?
Well, a lot like Lamar, I loved languages. And so the opportunity came to me through language. And the other thing is that I've been thinking about as I'm listening to everybody, the question of accessibility is a really big deal. And back when I was in college, state governments funded higher education in such a way that it wasn't expensive the way it is now. And I could actually pay to go to college by working. It was amazing. And at the University of Montana, where I was a student, the study abroad program to Morelia was the same amount of money as I was making to go to my classes at the university. And so, you know, why not? And then the other thing that I'm remembering sort of in that, like, why go? I must have been in a Spanish class or something where I'm seeing images of Mexico, and, you know, we didn't have the internet then. And so seeing them like on these slides, these professor slides, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just have to get there. And so I did. It really wasn't very hard to make it happen. And that has to do with the access question that now we turn to scholarships to address that.
Well, you know, I may be bringing that up. Maybe I'm going to jump ahead to a question I had a little later on, but what advice do you all have for a student who's maybe not sure it's something they want to do, or thinking this is so far out of reach financially? Do you have any advice for kind of, is it worth it to try? Is it, or like with your major, Maya, you're saying it was something, it was an impediment. Do you have any advice for kind of how to go about it or navigate it, or what they should do to keep from maybe being discouraged?
Go to the Reves Center.
Okay. And that's because, I mean, their funding, or I mean, is it
because of the funding, and also because people will talk to you and help you see the possibilities, and, you know, admit the challenges as well. But there are ways through, and I think it's the conversations that really matter. I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks about that.
Yeah, I think for my experience, I was a Gateway Scholar at William & Mary. And so thankfully, William & Mary was financially accessible for me because I came from a single parent household. No one in my family has ever been to college, and I went to the Reves Center. I was super excited to study abroad. I didn't know how I was going to be able to pay for it. And then they pointed me in the right direction. They told me about the Benjamin Gilman Scholarship for students who receive Pell Grant funding from William & Mary. You could apply for this scholarship, and so that made the program more accessible. There were also other scholarships available at the Reves Center. There was a parent who donated money to go to specifically to go to study abroad opportunities for William and Mary students. And so I applied for that scholarship as well. I wouldn't have known about it if I didn't go to the Reves Center. And so I think that's an excellent place to start. They have the resources there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add, you know, a lot of times folks think that study abroad has to be super expensive, but there are a lot of programs, especially since tuition and things of that sort in the US has increased, as Teresa mentioned, over the years. So there are a lot of programs that are cheaper than studying at William and Mary for a semester, especially if you go, many programs, even programs in Europe, but especially if you go to a place where the cost of living is cheaper than living in Williamsburg, for example. And then a lot of the programs and or schools, that, you know, that tuition price also and housing, et cetera, would be cheaper. And what students don't know too is that they can use, so in addition to applying to scholarships like Lamar mentioned, they can also use their current aid. So a lot of times students think that that's something separate, but because they are earning credits towards their William and Mary degree, they can utilize their funds that they receive to study, you know, in class on campus at William and Mary. They can use that to pay for a study abroad program. And so that makes it accessible if you're looking for an affordable quality program. And then also our office, the Reves Center, gives away over $500,000 to support study abroad, and we work a lot with financial aid and also with students reporting their financial situation and status to award those funds to students that need the money. So I think the biggest thing, like Teresa mentioned, is if it's something you think you might want to explore, definitely reach out to us. And, you know, you can come over to the Reves Center, and we're also available with pop-ins. So if you're like, oh, I don't really have time to hike over to the Reves Center, we have pop-ins where you can just Zoom in with us. And there are just so many ways that you can get in contact with us. And then we can kind of develop a plan. But I would say come early. So Lamar mentioning about the passport, and he kind of waited and then he finally disclosed, you know, come early, come early. The earlier you come, the better it is, where we can set up a plan to get you abroad. So I'll say that.
Well, I'm going to jump in before Maya, if you don't mind, but one thing I also have noticed is that you all have come up with programs. When I was in college, it was junior year abroad or nothing. And what's to me very exciting is, like Maya, you mentioned that you went in the summer because it didn't interfere with your science classes, but you've also got like short-term winter programs and then these sort of summer programs, which gives, so if you can't afford maybe a whole long period, you can still have an experience. Is that sort of, you seem to be branching out to different length programs. I think, Lamar, you did a different program, was it the SOMOS, that was also maybe a spring break program?
So I did the SOMOS program, which was over winter break, but then I did the program in Sevilla for spring semester junior year.
Okay, so maybe Nasha. Maya, did you have anything to add about? It's okay.
No, I mean, so I was lucky that I also came to William and Mary on a scholarship, and that aid allowed my family to be able to help me to do that Cadiz summer abroad experience. But I will say that, you know, there are the thing that I think most about is, you know, a lot of my friends who were in my science classes, very few of them got to do a study abroad experience because of the way that they wanted to structure their classes, or they were, you know, really busy, you know, because they wanted to go to medical school, so they were getting, you know, shadowing experiences over the summer. And so I really, you know, if you're of that mindset, it can be hard to think of study abroad if you're not getting, for example, like, credits towards your major, or towards, not getting a research or a medical sort of experience. It can be hard to think of it as being, worth the time and the money. But I think one of the great things about William and Mary is how broad everybody's interests are, and the really broad education that it gives you. And so I'll say that, those study abroad experience that I have been really great talking points for me, in my, as I applied to grad school and applied to jobs, because something that set me apart from other people who had very similar classes and research experience to mine, but who didn't necessarily get to take advantage of those opportunities in the way that I did.
Thank you. A great segue, because the next question is, what skills did you develop while studying abroad that may have had an impact in your career or just other life choices? Like, go ahead.
Yeah. Flexibility, adaptability. When I studied abroad, there was no smartphone. And so I had to download directions off of MapQuest and find a way from the airport to my homestay. And I think that was excellent practice. One, for me to use my Spanish. Two, to not get swindled by the taxi driver in Sevilla. But also three, I think it also gave me the confidence that I needed to know that I could thrive anywhere. I think that's the first thing. The second is, I lived with a homestay family while in Sevilla, and that was absolutely incredible. I got really close with my homestay parents. And so I think just that flexibility and adaptability really gave me the structure that I needed before my professional career. I'll even speak about, so for the nonprofit that I started, I was inspired by my study abroad experience. And so our first school partner, Maya, is Centro Mundo Lengua, is the school that I studied abroad with. And so this past summer, I got to bring my students, 12 kids, to study in Sevilla with Centro Mundo Lengua. And so it was a full circle moment for me. My tour guide still works at Centro Mundo Lengua, so I got to introduce my students to my tour guide. And so I got to see also students develop that same adaptability, flexibility, that teamwork, that like thinking on your toes, which is really beautiful to see over 10 years later after I had my study abroad experience.
Yeah, that's the same group that does Cuddies, and we love them. They're fantastic.
Nasha, I remember interviewing you a little bit about your experiences in Mali. You had to do a wide range of things as a young person in the Peace Corps. Were there skills that you learned in that, not necessarily directly apply, but you've drawn on in your career?
Yeah, I mean, there are similar skills, of course. I would say problem solving is, a really good skill that I strengthened rather when I was in Peace Corps, because it gave me an opportunity to kind of think outside of the box of what my normal everyday experiences were. So I'm like, oh, actually, I could do this like that instead of like I traditionally would do. One of the reasons why I wanted to do the Peace Corps is to obviously kind of align service with education, but also to improve upon my French language skills. So I studied French in college and throughout high school and middle school. And I wanted to actually be in a location where I would be speaking it on a regular basis. And so I kind of, selected all Francophone countries with Peace Corps. I went during the time where you could kind of indicate the region, but you couldn't select the country. So in addition to learning or improving upon my French language skills, I had to actually learn a local language. And so I ended up getting a third language under my belt, known as Bambara. So that was something that was unexpected, but useful. And I've used it in different aspects in my career. At my previous institution, we had a Women War and Peace conference, and there were a lot of collaborations with different organizations that had Malians and that were a part of those organizations. And I got to use my Bambara language skills at that point. So there are always things and items, I think, that you kind of develop and or learn while abroad that you don't even know, but later on, you know, they will be applicable in your life, you know?
I think that that later on part is really crucial. I mean, I see things now that I can trace back to study abroad that I absolutely didn't know when I was 20. And so I guess one thing that I want to say on that, I'm not sure about skills, actually. I think it for me is more like worldview. That was the big deal. Almost as soon as I got back from study abroad, I started working as an advocate for migrant farm workers. And that probably wouldn't have happened had I not had sort of those epiphanies that you actually do have when studying abroad, that countries are connected to each other and the movement of people isn't random. So that was so foundational that I think the skills are really important. I don't want to undersell that, but I feel like for me, the light bulbs about what's going on in the world, that was really the fundamental thing.
Although I'm interested when you just mentioned kind of in passing, there were some of the things that took years to kind of see the impact it had. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because maybe in terms of things that I'm just curious what you were thinking of when you said that, maybe, because people go on in different careers and they think, oh, is this just going to be a magical experience, but then separate from everything else?
Right. Well, you know, it's absolutely not separate from me or probably for anybody in this room. But one thing is that I'm a college professor and I teach literature. When I was in graduate school, I happened to hit that period of the history of education where everything was the text. There was no author. There was no reality outside the text. And I was like, oh no, come on, you know, give me a break. I think that these books are about something more than the words that are in them. And then I just, you know, muscled my way through graduate school so that and got to the point where as a professor myself, I could set up every course I taught with some connection to like reality. And that also doesn't happen without having made friends with, lived with people who are from, you know, someplace different. So yeah, I guess that would be one of the ways I would answer your question, Kate.
Well, and Maya, you mentioned, and I was wondering if it's the same with all of you, and maybe you want to talk about more, Maya, but that for people as they're job hunting now, that you were saying that it ended up being something that you could talk about that seemed to set you apart maybe from everyone else, a time when it's, you know, and I think so maybe you could, some people who haven't studied abroad or in that don't exactly see clearly how that is, but maybe you have an example of where your experience really did kind of spark an opportunity for you.
Yeah, so I remember when I was actually interviewing for I was interviewing for graduate schools to do my PhD in neuroscience, and at the time I was interested in studying bilingualism in the brain. And I remember I was at the program I ended up going to at UC San Diego. My last interview was with a professor who studied language in the brain, and he was really interested by the research that I had done when I was in Peru. Because he, you know, it was unusual for him to come across an applicant to a program like I was applying to who had research experience outside of just lab experience. So I was able to talk about like how I generated, like how I came up with the idea for that project, you know, how the connections I made to do it, you know, how I did the research for it. Because that was it was, you know, it wasn't research that was necessarily going to apply towards the thesis I eventually did, because it was on self-organizing communities in a suburb of Lima. but it was a research experience or a research topic he hadn't seen from another person who was interviewing. And we had a really rich conversation about, doing research in other languages and, my experience of that and how that tied into my interest in bilingualism, which ended up and not actually being the field that I studied, but I think that was a big contribution to my getting into that program, was sort of that particular part of my experience that was unusual, and that was something that I could speak to with a lot of fondness and also a lot of interest, because it was something I had gone to do myself because it was something I wanted to do, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Lamar, you seem to have a very clear path, but I bet maybe there were times along the way where something opened up because of your experience, or?
Yeah, I think the first thing selfishly that I would think of is, this is a total side note, I'm officiating my friend's wedding in June, and I met her when I studied abroad. She's from France, and when I was in Sevilla, I met her, and we just hit it off and became really good friends. And she eventually moved to New York, and I'm officiating her wedding. So I'm like, that's something cool you can get from studying abroad, is meeting people. My
Sure.
first month in Sevilla, I was definitely with the Americans. And then after that, I realized, okay, I am studying abroad right now. I need to stop speaking so much English and meet other people. And I made a group of friends, and I'm actually still in a group chat with them. They're huge fans of Toka now, but it's because of that study abroad experience, right? So I tell them they were part of this inspiration in me creating this program. I also often, when I think about my study abroad experience, obviously it's perfectly coupled with language learning. And I always say learning a language breeds cultural empathy. When you learn another language and just know about people's different backgrounds, Professor Longo, as you said, it just makes you have a greater appreciation of people and humanness. I know that there are also employability skills stats out there that say employers are looking for people that study abroad. So there's that out there. But I just think the human aspect of it is like what was the most powerful, and something that obviously still stays with me to this day.
That's great. Was going to switch gears just for a second before we open it up for questions. Are there any kind of funny or happy memories you have, maybe a duck out of water experience that you'd like to share? Something that happened while you were abroad that maybe you weren't expecting, or?
I have
Go ahead.
I have one memory. So when I was in Peru, I went with essentially a volunteer organization, so that way they provided me with like housing and food and access to actually the location I wanted to study in. But not actually, I would say even honestly, very few of the people who were volunteering there spoke particularly good Spanish. And so a couple of us had gone out into Miraflores, which was the sort of like more like Ritz, like nightclubby type district. And we're taking a taxi back, and the taxi blew a tire in the middle of like the highway in Lima, Peru. So not only did we have to get out, like pull over to the side of the road, I then had to negotiate for us to get another taxi that would take us back for like not, charging us double the price, that would stop in the middle of the highway and pick us up, because I was the only one who spoke Spanish and could like really like get anyone to understand me. And I just remember it being like one of those like, okay, I did not expect that this would be part of my experience, but I guess I just kind of have to take charge. And having, that was, I think, one of the moments where I really was like, okay, I am actually like really an independent person now. And also I'm going to make sure we all don't get, kidnapped or have something like really, really sketchy happen, because it was it could have been a very interesting experience in other ways. But luckily I had the Spanish skills and the clear head enough to get us home in one piece.
That's great. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, two things. One, the first thing that came to my mind, when I studied abroad in Sevilla, through the William and Mary program, I was also set up with an internship. So I got to teach English while in Spain, and I taught English in Spanish. I thought that was incredible. I remember the young lady that I tutored. Her name was Azul. And I just remember making so many mistakes with my Spanish, and she would laugh at me hysterically, which I felt was such a comfortable space for me to practice my Spanish with a 6-year-old. And so just for those 3 months, we like constantly made jokes back and forth with each other, and she would always laugh at my Spanish. And so that's the first thing. And I think the second thing, when I'm thinking of being a fish out of water or outside of my comfort zone, I think it's also helpful to have a better idea of who you are. Growing up, my mom always talked to me about being Black, being a boy, but I never had a chance to reflect on my identity as an American. What does it mean to be an American, right? And you don't really reflect on that until you travel. And so I got to learn how, in so many ways, I'm very American. And I think that that's important to know as you become an adult, and as you continue to travel more. So I'm really grateful for that study abroad experience to build confidence in myself, but also to get me better understand who I am in the spaces that I occupy.
Great.
So Kate, my story is more embarrassing than it is inspirational for sure, but I
Okay.
remember that with the family that I stayed with, there were 2 little kids in the family, a little boy and a little girl. And my Spanish, I thought it was good, but it really wasn't. The little girl showed me several pictures of the little boy whose name was Aaron. And she kept saying rana, which means frog. And so I thought, oh, okay, that's good. He must have the nickname of frog. And she was actually trying to trick me into thinking that this kid's name was Frog. And so I started calling him Frog. And the family was like horrified, like, who is this American girl coming in calling our little boy a frog? Till it took a little bit of time, and I figured it out that she got me. So yeah, and all that stuff, a lot of funny things I think do happen through language mistakes more than language itself.
Nasha, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I definitely the language, I'll add this and then actually answer your question. So I'm going to add that listening to Lamar and Teresa made me think about a situation with my host family, Jatigi, in Mali. I talked to them about a project that I was working on, and this is all in Bambara. And they were like, oh, are you finished with the project? And I meant to say, I'm not finished with the project yet. I'll be finished, soon. But I ended up saying, I'm not dead yet. I'll be dead soon. So that is, you guys are just totally bringing back memories. But I will say I kind of had a surreal moment in Mali when I went on a 5-day hike of the Dogon Cliffs. They're in the northern part of the country. Because I remembered studying the Dogon Cliffs in in an African art history class that I had in undergrad, which was at George Mason University. And I just could not believe that it was a surreal moment. I'm like, I am here hiking these cliffs that I read and researched. It was just amazing. And then the second experience was going on a camel ride in Timbuktu in the Saharan desert. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. Those are the types of surreal experiences. And my parents were with me in Timbuktu, and my dad, I will never forget him saying that he was on a camel too. And he said, I never thought I would be ever in my life on a camel ride in the Saharan desert. This is just amazing. It was a surreal experience for them and for me too. So
That's great. This is so much fun. Are there any questions? I've been asking all of the questions. Do we have anything in the chat, Andrew?
In the chat.
Is anybody else or our person in the room? Would you like to ask? Oh,
David might have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have questions. I have two actually. So the first one is a superficial one is like how do you spell the caddies program? I'm interested in learning a bit more about that.
It's CADIZ with an accent over the A. Yep, there it is. It's in the chat.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And the second question is, I guess, like, how did each of you like make the most out of your study abroad opportunities?
Don't speak so much English. Try to stay away from Americans.
Okay.
They're always here. This is comfortable. And so, of course, I'll admit the first month in Spain, I had a great time. I was meeting people from all over and partying with them and hanging out and getting dinner. And that was so much fun. But then when I started to meet Spaniards, they would invite me to their home for like barbecue. So I got to meet their families, and then they invited me to other places. And like, this is an experience I'm never going to have again. And so I think pushing yourself to step outside of your comfort zone and to meet local people would be the best way to take full advantage of your experience.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's huge. And also I would say to not be afraid to make mistakes. Like, I think that we all, good students, all of us want to be perfect and get an A, and it just let that go.
Got it.
I added in the chat also, eat everything, get all the food, just do
Everything.
it. Go
anything.
full in there. Might be a weird dish, do it.
I remember the in Peru, the delicacy weird dish is cuy, which is guinea pig. In Peru, they're raised as for meat. It's a traditional meat. And I tried it, and it tasted pretty good. It's not something I would necessarily order again, especially not in the States, but I certainly don't regret having tried it.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing.
Did it taste like chicken?
It did. It tasted like dark meat chicken. Yeah, it did.
I will say that we always get great photos from the Cadiz program. There's a big dishes of paella, usually with William and Mary spelled in it. So I'm not quite sure what goes on at the program, but every year we get one of those.
So that's actually, part of the program is we all make a paella together.
Okay.
So that is part of the program. And yeah, we spelled WM out with peppers in the paella. Yeah, it's really fun and so delicious.
Great.
Nice.
Thanks. Any other questions, or we've got some time? No? Let's see if we've got any.
Let me see. I might have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Administrative though.
Mhm.
That's fine.
No, that's what you're here for. You got
Okay.
it.
I guess one of my questions is, I was wondering if study abroad is able to fulfill any of like the core curriculum, because what I've heard is like sometimes people take study abroad, but they might fall behind on certain like curriculum or like major requirements that they have to complete. So is there any way to like do both at the same time?
The answer is definitely fulfills requirements and electives. So the undergraduate curriculum at William and Mary basically is divided in three. There are electives, there is a core general education curriculum, and then there's the major. So the electives and the core curriculum that's general ed, absolutely. And then the other part can be a little more challenging, but you just have to talk to your professors and see what's going to transfer. And sort of speaking to some of the things that Maya told us, the science faculty are now in 2022 much more committed to study abroad than in 2010. So it's all really possible. There's a little work to put in, but it's very, very possible to have practically everything count in some way.
And I will add a couple of things. One, that is why it's so critical to come early, come early as soon as you think, even if it's a thought and you don't go through with it, but you're like, oh, I might want to do this. It's important to come to the Reves Center early, and to also, like Teresa mentioned, work closely with an academic advisor and say, hey, I'm thinking I might want to study abroad. I'm a pre-med major, or I'm a physics major. I'm thinking I might want to do this. How would my 4 years, what would that look like? Students have to keep in mind, like, about 60% of William and Mary students study abroad. And so faculty, like Teresa mentioned, they're on board with it. They're very experienced with the fact that their students may be going abroad. And so the earlier you come, the more you can plan the best term and or time to go abroad, and the type of classes that you can take. So I will say that. And then also our office works closely with the academic departments and faculty. And there is a faculty approver or a faculty point person for study abroad in every single department. It's all listed on our website under study abroad and credits, because obviously we definitely want you to have a wonderful experience and learn, network and gain lots of skills, or develop lots of skills. But the point is studying. Like, that is the number one thing, is that you're studying, and it needs to fit in and align with your degree. And so we work really hard with faculty and academic departments to make that a possibility for students. So coming early, doing things early is super important.
And is call 300 often can dovetail with study abroad, right? So actually everyone's required to have that, right? To graduate call 300?
Yep.
You had another question? Or was
yeah, so I'm thinking of an exchange program maybe. So that's kind of like choosing courses at another university. I was wondering, yeah, sort of along the same lines, not only the credits, but also like the grades, do those transfer over, or like is it pass fail? I don't know, how much leeway do I have in that? I guess if I take, for example, maybe 4 or 5 courses, can I expect all of them to have some impact on like my William and Mary transcript, or maybe only like half of them or 3/4 of them, something like that?
Okay, so if you're going abroad for a semester, students, have to transfer all of those credits back. So you're registered with the university as an active student, but you're studying abroad. So we need to make sure you're studying, right? So you do have to take all of those credits back. And that's another thing where you're working with your academic advisor ahead of time to determine. You'll have the list of classes that you could possibly take. The partner university, I'm not sure which one you're interested in, will have a list available usually on their website. And then you'll work with your academic advisor to kind of say, oh, which classes do you think would be a good fit for me? Or the faculty approver in another department, like what classes have students taken and previously, and what type of credit have they gotten. Some academic departments will do pre-approval. So before you even go abroad, you're submitting your course syllabus for the classes, the course descriptions, etc. And they are telling you what it's going to count for when you return. The biggest thing is that you need to do that beforehand. There are some students who don't, and so they get surprises when they get back. So any planning is key. Planning. That is key. And the earlier you begin to plan, at least probably a year before you decide you want to go, the better it is. The more funding you get in terms of being able to secure out, scholarships within William and Mary as well as outside, and the better you're able to plan your credits. So that's the important thing. Just curious, which exchange are you interested in?
Well, I'm only Well, I'm a freshman, so I'm just starting out, just considering all this. But I was thinking of Singapore. It's a very interesting place. It's kind of the intersection of a lot of different cultures in Asia, and I've never been there before. Also, my roommate has like some family relatives around there, so he's also interested in doing it. We might do it together. And yeah, just the very early stages, just exploring, seeing what's going on. Yeah, I definitely will try to at least have one study abroad. And yeah, someplace very interesting. Maybe hope to make the most out of it. Yeah.
So my colleague, Molly DeStaffany, she's the Senior Associate Director in our office. She is the advisor for NUS, the National University of Singapore, and go see her early because that is a competitive program. So you want to make sure you get everything together. You know, she will give you the best advice to make sure your application is really competitive. And yeah, so see her early and then also talk with your academic advisor as well.
Kate, could I jump in on a slightly different topic? I just am remembering that this is a setup about careers. It's International Career Week. I want to note that so many students that I've taught or advised, and also my own children, have gotten jobs and been admitted to graduate schools, not exclusively because they studied abroad, but they found ways to make the link, and it really, really matters. It matters differently for different people. It depends on what you want to do, but there's a very strong thread between a job, a career, and having studied abroad. And we can, if you're not sure like what that link is, there are people all around at, you know, Andrew and at the Career Center and in the Reves Center who can help you figure out what is that connection, because it's absolutely there.
Great. Now, well, we're almost at the end, right? We have a few. Anybody else have a question before we ask like one last question? Anybody? No? Just one thing, if you had it to do over again, would you study abroad, and maybe where would you go? So you can, anybody who wants to start.
That's what I've been doing since I first went.
Yes.
So
you just
yes.
came back from Greece, right? So if you had it to do over again, Lamar, go ahead.
I would do it again. I would probably do a year. I think 6 months, and I was a Hispanic Studies major, right? So my classes fit perfectly with my major. I think just having that really prolonged experience, that language exposure, is an incredible resource. So I would do it again. I would still choose Sevilla. I love Sevilla so much. I would do it longer.
I would 100% do it again. I would probably do the same things that I did, but what I would have really loved to do was be able to somehow find a way to get to study abroad and experience researching in a lab somewhere else in the world. I had a lot of friends who were able to do that as part of graduate school, but I would have loved to have had that opportunity. I think it would have been incredible to be able to experience the research environment that I was looking to join as my career somewhere else in the world.
Well, may I interject real fast before Nasha? We have Reves faculty fellows, I just off the top of my head, who go and do scientific research. We have Shantae Hinton, who does biology research on cancer studies. So that's something for Nasha's advice about connecting with your academic advisor. So, I mean, I've just seen in the time I've been here, a lot of some really cool research projects, because faculty with Reves fellowships have to bring students. So I will make that plug and now be quiet. Nasha, would you like to, where would you go?
Yeah, I would say I would actually study abroad in undergrad. And I probably would have, I've chosen some type of Francophone country, but yeah, I would have done that and really investigated more about financials, and planned a little earlier and really sought out information, a little earlier, really. So I'll leave it at that.
And Teresa, I think I interrupted you. Have you?
No, you didn't interrupt me. I was just making a joke about, how I'm always trying to do study abroad. I did just get back from Greece. I was on a delegation of administrators and faculty from across the country that went to Greece to try to figure out how to set up some partnerships. And I felt like I was on study abroad. We were on the bus a lot, and we were, being taken all around and seeing new things. And I remember that that's actually kind of hard and exhausting and wonderful. So again, my answer is yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Lamar.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. So I think my study abroad experience also planted the seed of travel in my brain. Since studying abroad, I've now backpacked through Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia. I went to Cuba. I'm now back here in Spain. And I literally wouldn't have done all of that if it wasn't for my first study abroad experience.
Well, take 1 second. If you want to make a little plug for your TOCA, your nonprofit, just for people.
Thank you so much. I love talking about TOCA. I won't shut up about it. If you all have Instagram, please follow Teens of Color Abroad. That's our name. Maya, I have to send you the video of the kids surfing in Cadiz, because these are kids who've never surfed before.
Oh my God, yes,
Surfing
please,
on the beach in
please.
Cadiz.
I have to see that. I'm dying to see it.
Incredible. Follow us on Instagram, teensofcolorabroad.org if you'd like to learn more. Of course, have to say a big thank you to Professor Longo and a lot of my professors at William & Mary for really pushing me to eventually create this. But yeah, since we've started, we've now sponsored brand new passports for 20 students. So for Dr. Ade to get me my first passport, and now we've been able to get first passports for 20 kids, some of which are now in college and studying abroad, which is incredible. We created a virtual language learning program. I started TOCA in 2018, right before the global pandemic started. What a terrible time to start a study abroad organization. But we created a virtual program where our students are studying Arabic, Spanish, and French from refugees from around the world. And so we hire and employ refugees to teach languages virtually to our students. And I think that also speaks to what I was saying earlier about language learning breeding cultural empathy. I wanted our students to have a language learning experience, but that cannot be completely separated from the people and from community. And I learned all of that at William & Mary. I think William & Mary does a fantastic job of pushing people to get out of their comfort zones and get out of the US, but also to find the community in wherever you are. And it's what I'm doing is a direct result of that entire experience. So really thankful to William & Mary for giving me the foundation that I needed to make an impact on other kids like me. So yeah.
Oh, well, we're really grateful. I think, Andrew, this is great. I'm grateful. I think all of you, Maya, Lamar, Nasha, Teresa, and anybody else participating. I think I almost had a feeling that you were a ringer, that someone paid for you to come in and ask great questions. So I hope you go to Singapore. You're just sending the softballs up for Nasha to hit back. Anyway, thank you all. I'm so grateful. I'm inspired, and I appreciate it. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving, and plan early. Remember to go to Global Education Office. They are there and ready to help. So thank you, all of you, for participating. Take care. Thanks, everyone.